I'm Lauren Whitehurst. I'm a certified personal trainer and certified nutrition coach.
Hi, I'm Sunny Lippincott. I'm a certified professional life coach and a certified brain health professional.
We also have Angela Salyers, who is a licensed professional counselor, and the three of us together make up
Whole Life Vitality.
We teach whole life vitality of the mind, body, and soul, bringing the physical, emotional, and spiritual together for whole life wellness. Welcome back, friends. We are here today with a special guest, Rebeka Beavers. She is a good friend of mine, and oh my goodness, her story has just inspired me since the day I met her. So I'm so excited to kind of walk through her story with you today. Rebeka, girl. All right. First of all, I met you because...
Well, I think we can blame Renee for that. Renee was the one that was like, you two need to be friends.
Right. So I grew up in the city and then moved to this tiny little town in Texas when I was 13 years old. And you and I must have been just growing up kind of like parallel.
I know.
Because we're close enough in age that I think what am I, like 3 years older than you?
Yeah,
Maybe
we
4 years
definitely
older?
crossed paths for
Right.
sure.
Close enough that in that short period of time that I was there before I moved out, it's possible that we could have crossed paths at one point or another.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved away. And as an adult, we met and oh my goodness, became fast friends. But our journeys as adults took very different paths. So you were a teenager when you decided to make some really interesting life shifts. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, I think that's such a nice way to put it, honestly. Yes, I was a teenager. So I think what Lauren's referring to is I was a teen mom.
A teen mom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you were. How old were you when you got pregnant with Levi?
I was 18.
You were 18. Okay. So I mean, definitely a baby, especially because now your wonderful son is 17. And can you imagine
I know.
being a dad next year?
No. It's really scary to think about. And, I was 18, but I was in second semester of my senior year of high school. So I was like having morning sickness and like hanging out in the teacher's lounge on the couch because I was like so miserable and like couldn't even sit up in class. So it was a very interesting experience. 0 out of 10 recommend.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so awful. I'm just thinking about what a senior year is supposed to be and like all the fun and parties and people doing all the things. And then you're stuck in bed with morning sickness. Yeah,
it was definitely not a fun time.
So what were your thoughts when you found out at 18 that you were pregnant?
Yeah, I think I can take you guys back to probably a year before I ended up getting pregnant. So that year, my parents got divorced and we live in a really, really small town. And it was like my whole life blew up overnight, pretty much. And everybody knows your shame. Like it's like the scarlet letter. You're walking around with your scarlet letter on. And so for me, that was like really tough. And, I was 16 or I was 17 years old at the time. And my whole world had been rocked. And so it was like navigating a new land. I was like in a foreign country, that was my life. And so that all happened. And then I'm entering into my senior year of high school. My boyfriend at the time was in the Marine Corps. And so he wasn't here. He was, serving, doing training and all the things.
He had already graduated?
He had already graduated. So he was even like out of the state most of the time. And so when I ended up getting pregnant, it was very much like, whoa. For me, it was a shock, but also looking back, I'm like, it's not that shocking.
Okay, but just to be clear,
result.
You got pregnant with the boyfriend who is in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
So like that kind of made it sound like he was out of state and you got pregnant with somebody else,
no.
But he came back in
Same
the
guy.
state. Same guy.
Yeah. Same guy. And he ended up about the same time that I got pregnant. we found out that he was going to be deploying to Iraq.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it was a lot. It was a lot in a year that happened when you're 17, 18 years old.
Man, that was such a crazy time. What year was that? Do you remember?
So it was, yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, you remember.
Yeah, it was 2006. So it's 2005 when my, D-Day, when my world blew up with my parents. And
Yeah.
then 2006 is when I got pregnant with Levi.
Oh my goodness. Wow. And that's when Greg was deployed.
Yeah, so that's when Greg was deployed. So we kind of had a decision to make as far as like, so you're 18 years old, you're pregnant. It's like everybody's like, so you're getting married, right?
Well,
Like
I think
small town.
especially in small town
Oh
South,
yeah.
you're in the South, you're in a small
Uh-huh.
town. That's
hmm
just what is expected of you. It's that
hmm
shotgun wedding situation.
Yeah. And I really like pushed back on that for a couple of months. And then it really came down to, well, we need to get married because I needed the insurance coverage and I also needed the protections in place for me and my child in case something did happen to Greg because he was being deployed to an active war zone at the time. So
Mm,
that was like a very harsh reality was like he may not come home. So you need to make sure that you and this child are well cared for in case of like the worst case scenario.
right.
So we did end up getting married. We got married on May 31st. We went to the Justice of the Peace here in Honey Grove, where we live. And our high school government teacher married us because he was also the JP at the time.
He was also my high school history teacher.
Yeah.
And he was
Yes.
fantastic.
He was fantastic. Yeah. So that was a very surreal moment. And then we went to Chili's and ate dinner.
Oh my gosh, because that's what 18-year-olds do. They go to
Yeah.
Chili's and eat dinner.
Yeah, we were just like, I think in a fog and just like oh my gosh, what is
What
happening
do we
kind of, you're
do?
in shock, really.
Yeah.
You're in survival mode. You go into that very innate like survival mode. And so Greg and I both don't really have a lot of memories from then because I think our bodies were doing the best. Our brains were like, must
Yeah.
protect, wipe all this traumatic stuff away, right? So it's a good and a bad because we don't really have a lot of memories from that time. But at the same time, I'm like, thanks, body, for working so hard to protect me.
Yeah. Isn't that so interesting? They say the body stores and processes what the brain can't handle. And
hmm
especially with the understanding of a child, because you were still a child, then you could only work through as much as you could work through. So then your body kind of just tucked this other stuff away for you to deal with later.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That book, The Body Keeps the Score,
Yeah, such a good
is
one.
literally like our life
Yeah.
because there are things that even that happened then that as a 35-year-old woman in present day, I am remembering or my body is just now beginning to process.
Yeah.
So I do think like I'm grateful for the way that God designed our bodies in that regard because I do think it's important to help us to get through those things when we don't
Mhm.
have the tools in our toolbox to be able to process them.
I
And
agree.
now I do have those tools and resources. And so my body's like, okay, this is a safe place now. We can allow these things to come to the surface and be dealt with.
Yeah. That's amazing. So I kind of want to jump around a little bit. So
Yeah.
to jump all the way ahead, um, you didn't have the typical teen pregnancy because that typical story is teen pregnancy, fighting trauma, relationship drama, ultimately divorce, and spinning around and around that cycle. I mean, we've seen it so
Yeah.
many times. So just to jump forward to today, that beautiful baby boy is now 17 years old,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
crazy.
It's insane, you guys. He just turned 17 a couple of weeks ago. And not only is like his existence just a miracle in itself, but he is such an amazing human.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a 17-year-old boy. Okay, so let's just be real. But also he is just brilliant. And I feel so blessed that God chose me to be his mom. I just feel like, wow, so humbled and honored to be given that responsibility.
Yeah. And how are you and Greg after, I guess, 18 years of
Yeah.
marriage?
Yeah. Funny story. We're actually going to celebrate. Our anniversary was in May 31st, and we're just now getting to celebrate our 18th anniversary.
And I feel like that right there is like just exactly what 18 years of marriage looks like, because
Yeah.
life and all the things, and you just kind of do what you can. You're like, I love
Yeah,
you
you
every day,
do.
sweetie. We can
Yeah.
celebrate when we can celebrate.
Yeah, it's just the reality of like having two kids and businesses and work and all the things.
Mhm.
So, yes. Greg and I always joke like we're that statistic anomaly. Like, we should not still be married. It's insane. But that's what happens when you get two very stubborn people who are just like, we're going to work this out, whatever it takes.
When you're stubborn in the same direction, you're
Yes.
stubborn in the direction of, I'm going to make this work at all costs. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to stay in this. Then absolutely, that's what marriage is right there, because
Yeah.
it is two people being 100% in and being willing to do whatever work is necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's definitely us sometimes probably to a fault.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, so we're still married. And I actually really like him. He's a really, really great guy. And I think he likes me for the most part. We both have backgrounds where we came from families of divorce, and we knew that we didn't want that for our family. We wanted our kids to be able to have this kind of safe space to always come back to, whether, they grow up and leave. I mean, I'm planting trees in my orchard that I'm like thinking about my grandkids when they come here, and we're going to be able to harvest fruit off of those trees. Like I like being able to have those thoughts. And a lot of it is like, I always say, like, Jesus gets all the glory for everything, because honestly, you guys, if it were up to us as human beings, like, we couldn't have figured it out. It was really like faith that helped us to get to this point. And every day is still, we're still a work in progress, right? Now we're in the deep throes of raising teenagers. We have a 17-year-old Levi, and then we have a daughter, Macy, who's 13. She just turned 13 this year. So yeah, it's wild.
It's amazing. So obviously your faith has been a huge focal point for you. You've mentioned it a couple of times. Is that something that you shared with Greg that has gotten you through?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest things that really helped us early on in our like situation with the teen pregnancy and him being deployed, he was actually in Iraq when Levi was born. So he didn't even meet Levi until Levi was 6 months old.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And, so he went away to war and came back like a veteran of war, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he came back, I was a mom. So it's like we both kind of were two totally different people. I didn't know who he was. He didn't know who I was. And we really had to relearn each other. And I really credit really like the Lord for helping us to have people in our lives, like placing the right people in our lives to care for us in those seasons. Like, we lived next door to this wonderful couple who just really like poured into me and made sure to check on me every day. She was just so lovely and would bring over dinner or ice cream, or they had a granddaughter who was about Levi's age, and she'd say, come use the baby swing whenever you want. And it was great to be cared for and looked after, even though I didn't realize that was what was happening at the time. And I have to give our families a lot of credit too. Like, his dad was like, hey, when you get home, because he was away in Iraq, and then he was like, oh my gosh, I have a family I have to provide for.
Right.
Like, what am I going to do when I get back? And because he was in the reserves, he did need to find employment outside of the Marine Corps. So when he got home, his dad was like, I have a job for you. Here's, this job, and you can go to college at the same time and finish your degree that he had already started prior to that. My mom and my dad and my stepmom and my stepdad were just so great and gracious to like offer help and support whenever they could. So I think for us, the Lord really showed up in that specific season by like giving us these people who loved us and supported us when even in the darkest and hardest times.
It's so amazing. So what did your parents think about? What did his parents think about this whole thing? I mean, the way you're saying it makes it sound like they were all really supportive. Was that from the get-go?
At the time that I found out I was pregnant, I was really not in a good place with both of my parents because of everything that had happened prior with their relationship. And there was just a lot of, they were broken people. And when you're cut yourself and you're not able to heal that wound, like you go and you bleed on other people, that saying, right? And that's definitely what was happening within my parents' relationship with me and my siblings, is they were really broken and hurting. And so they couldn't quite figure out how to stop their own bleeding, let alone to come and help stop ours. And so when I found out I was pregnant, I went like directly to my mom, was like, hey, this is what's going on. And from the get-go, even though we weren't in the best place, she was like, it's okay. We're going to figure it out. Don't worry about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
It was
huge.
crazy. Yeah. It was such a gift. And then on Greg's side of the family, they were just like, okay, yeah, we'll figure it out.
That's huge. Did you feel pressure from any of them one way or the other? Were they pushing you to get married, or did you feel like that was all just you figuring things out?
Yeah, I don't feel like I felt pressure. I do think, like, I remember having a conversation with my dad, and he's like, that would be so dumb not to, because he's thinking from a man's point of view, which is like financial security. You would have
Yeah.
insurance, you would have, these things in place in case of this situation. And I was like an 18-year-old kid, like, I'm not going to do anything I don't want to do.
Right. Yep.
I wouldn't say pressure, but I would say there was like some pretty strong guidance in the way of like, we think this would be best, but it's your choice kind of thing.
Which is amazing that your parents had the ability to step back like that, especially with you being so young. I would like to think that I could handle a situation like that similarly, but man, it's so hard, even at this point with teenagers, to step back and start to relinquish some control as they start to make their own decisions. I can't even imagine getting to the place where they're 18 and making these huge, dramatic, life-altering decisions. And
Yeah.
there had to be a lot of prayer on your parents' behalf. I feel like I've prayed my way through teenage years as is. But
Yeah.
so then here you are, brand new baby. He's home from the war and you're trying to figure things out again. What was that like?
I think going back to the body keeps the score again, that was a time of life where I don't really have a lot of recollection or memory around because it was so traumatic.
Okay.
Honestly, it was probably the darkest of times in our relationship and in my walk in motherhood too, because I felt very alone. I just remember feeling very isolated, very alone, which was not the case. Like, again, like I said, I had all these people surrounding me who loved me and taking care of me and checking on me.
But perception is reality. And so that was your reality, was that you felt alone.
Yeah. And so I decided to go to cosmetology school because it's so funny.
That's so fun.
Because I wanted to make friends. And I was like 19 with a baby, and there's not a lot of 19-year-olds where I lived that had babies. And all my friends had like gone off to college or moved away, started their lives in a different capacity. What happens
in a small town. People go off to college or move away.
Yeah. And I didn't want to come back here when Greg got home from Iraq. I really wanted to be somewhere else because why do you want to come back to the source of so much trauma?
Right.
But for him, it wasn't a source of trauma. It was this safe place that he was, familiar with. It was home for him. And so I was like, okay, I can make this sacrifice on your behalf because I can't imagine going through what you went through. And I wanted to provide him that safe space to kind of come back to himself because he wasn't himself, when he got back. And I think us being here with such familiarity, like really helped with that in a way.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
I just feel like as you're telling your story, I'm feeling all the feels for you. I mean, I know that I'm an empathetic person and I know you, but I hope that this is coming through because from you as you're telling your story for our listeners, because there's so many choices that you made, so many just small choices that you made over the course of what felt like a really short period of time for you, a really hard time that really dramatically affected where you are now. And
Right.
you wanted to do something that was good for you. You felt like I need friends. And so you went out there and you did something and you
Yeah.
continued to educate yourself in the process. And that's huge.
Yeah, I feel like at that time in my life, I was really looking for companionship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, what can I do? And we didn't have the money for me to like go back to college.
Right.
So I was like, what is something that is affordable that I could pursue? Like you said, that would be like a continued education of some sort, but also I could meet people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. And I met some really incredible people that I am still friends with to this day.
That's awesome.
And through them, it propelled me into the next season of my life because I met people. It's like, have you ever thought about how sometimes people are doorways in our
Mm-hmm.
lives, right? And so you may come in contact with somebody and they may not be your vibe, right? But you, through them, may be introduced to somebody who
Yeah,
is meant to be in your space for this
absolutely.
current season. And that's for sure what happened to me. I actually met a mom of one of the girls that I went to school with, and she was involved in like this fitness program. And I was like, what is this? You know, I was an athlete all growing up and had kind of fallen away from that as I was, became a mom at 18.
Yeah.
And she was doing this fitness program that focused on like all four parts of health, which is like not just your physical, but your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual. And I was like, I need that.
Which
So
is 100% necessary if you want to get healthy, because you can't fix yourself
that's
physically
right.
if you don't handle
Yeah.
yourself emotionally, spiritually, mentally, all of those things.
Exactly. So through her, so this sweet friend of mine became a doorway to her mom, her mom became a doorway to this fitness program. This fitness program became a doorway to completely transforming and changing my life for the better. Because that's where I learned how to fuel my body, like with food. That's where I learned how to fuel my body with God's word. That's where I learned how to fuel my body with, I learned how to cook. I learned like it totally transformed my life. When I say like transformed, I mean
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here in this place today if it wasn't for that decision. And I think that's so cool how when you make these decisions that don't seem so huge at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
but then you look back on your life and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Life altering. Yeah. And you're just
Yeah.
grateful to, past Rebeka for stepping on that path when she was given the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so
I am
wonderful.
thankful for Pastor Rebecca all the time.
I think that there are so many ways that your mindset has made such a huge impact in where you are right now. Even what you just said, I'm grateful for Pastor Rebecca all the time. Not because Pastor Rebecca didn't make any mistakes and she got everything right
Right.
all the time, but because Pastor Rebecca was almost always in a space where she was able to learn and grow and exist through these places so that you could get to where you are now.
Exactly. Thanks for putting that in a nutshell.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. So then let's fast forward. You raised children. You
Mhm.
obviously had another. You thought, oh, we're pretty good at this. Let's do it. Let's do a little do over. And you have Macy, and she's wonderful. And I feel like we could do so many podcasts and come back to this because even just on parenting, we could do an entire podcast on
Oh, yeah.
parenting these sweet babies. But let's stick with you right now, just for a minute. So you made your way through all of this, and you did all the physical health stuff. As you got older and your children needed different things, what you learned about the spiritual and the physical and the mental, and even the body keeps the score.
Mhm.
Also The Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. I think we've talked about that book as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
So good. But I've seen you even in these, gosh, how long have I known you? Like 8 years? I don't know, 9 years. I feel like it's been a while.
Yeah.
It was before I moved. Um, just in that time, I've seen you work through so much as just personally. I've seen you shift how you treat yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you raise your children. What can you share with us about prioritizing that type of self-care, prioritizing yourself and not getting lost in the land of being a mom? How do you
Yeah,
do that?
that's such a good question. I think for me, it all comes back to really being passionate about breaking like generational cycles and curses that I feel like have followed, right, my family bloodlines. And when I kind of became educated about that and I looked back at like generation to generation, it's like, okay, well, all that stops here with me. And what can I do to make sure that those things don't, follow us? And one of those things would be teen pregnancy.
Yeah.
My dad was actually put up for adoption. And
Wow.
so that is like right there, right? Like that's my dad. So not
Because
even
he was
generations away.
a product of teen
Yes.
pregnancy.
Yeah. Out of
Okay.
wedlock. Yes.
Wow.
Um, so it was like, oh, that is that has translated to us being very open and honest with our children when it comes to our physical bodies. And we have conversations all the time about when you make choices, there are going to be consequences, good and bad. So
Mm-hmm.
I think because we saw the things that we didn't want to continue through us and into our children and our grandchildren and, their children, it was like, okay, what can we do to make sure that doesn't happen? A lot of it, honestly, is open communication all the
Yeah.
time. And even in the hard stuff, even in the uncomfortable stuff, it's just like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's process it. Let's get it all out. And so that has been a decision that Greg and I made together that has really benefited our family thus far. Like we've had our moments, don't get me wrong. We've all had those hard parenting moments, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's been times where I've had to take a look at myself and go like, okay, I need to take accountability for this thing that I did. And so we talk a lot about like apologizing to our kids. Like if I do something, that saying where it's like, oh my gosh, my dad just came out of my mouth or my
Oh my
mom
gosh, yes.
just came out.
I
And
think
then
we
you're
have
like,
all experienced that, and it is jarring.
it is so jarring. And it's all about for me taking accountability in that and going like, okay, that was my mistake. And so
Yeah.
how can I correct that? Well, it's always just taking accountability and apologizing and being like, you
Mm-hmm.
know what, I'm going to try to do better next time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those things have been really beneficial in like our parenting journey, mine and Greg's parenting journey, just trying to just make the next right choice, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
just do the next right thing,
That
which sometimes seems so easy, but in
mm,
the moment can be really difficult.
well, trying to figure out what the next right thing is,
Right.
and then proceeding with just that one tiny little step. And I think that that is a lot of times where people get hung up with most things, because they might see the grand picture of what they want the end to look like, but just starting with that tiny little step of what that next right thing could be is really what makes the difference, because life is built up of a million of those tiny little steps.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so amazing. I love watching you parent your kids. You are such an inspiration to me. It makes me want to be a better parent. I think
Same. Thank you.
we're all learning and growing as we do this. I saw something recently that was talking about it was much older people in their 70s and 80s, and how they were saying, we're all just pretending to be grown-ups. We're all just pretending to have it all figured out, when really we're all just children still.
Right.
And some of us are just pretending harder than others.
Yeah, I know. It's like when you become a grown up, you're like, wait a second, they didn't know everything. What?
Yeah. And am I allowed to do this? Is someone going to come tell me I'm not allowed to do this? Hang on. Wait a minute. And then you are solely responsible for all of your actions.
Oh, right. Exactly.
Adulting is weird.
Yeah, it is so weird. And I try to tell, having a 17-year-old who's like on the cusp of adulthood, and I'm just like, you are not going to have it figured out. And the second that you think you have it figured out, the game will change and you'll be like, I know nothing. And I'm just
Every
like, just
time.
know you're not alone. We're all
Yeah.
in that same place.
And acknowledging that you know nothing and being receptive to learning from the people around you that maybe do know more
Yes.
is the best thing you could ever do for yourself. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what you've done. As long as I've known you, everything I've learned about your story has always been, well, where can I learn from this? How can I grow through this? What can I get out of this? What am I missing here that I don't know that I
Mm-hmm.
can learn? And that is just such a growth mindset. Is that who you've always been? Is that who childhood Rebeka was? Is that who she was as a teenager? Or did this kind of evolve as you got older?
I definitely think those qualities have followed me throughout my life. I think they're very ingrained in just my natural personality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I am like an external processor. Like I'm not really doing anything unless I've thought it through or I've talked it out loud. I mean, we've had many conversations where I'm like, oh, turns out I already knew the answer. I just needed to say it out loud so I could hear
Right.
myself say it.
Right.
So I think, yeah, it's definitely been a part of my just makeup. Who is Rebeka? Even at a young age, because I do look back at my childhood and I'm like, that's funny. I can imagine raising myself. But sometimes I feel like I am a little bit because I see those personality traits like in my kids.
Yeah.
Like Levi, he's a very logical person. He's thought things through. He's very methodical and he's not just doing something like throwing caution to the wind. Like he's thought it out. And then Macy's kind of the same way. She's also like, she's doing things for a reason. Levi, when he would get in trouble as a little kid, and this is so me as a kid too, from what I remember, he would say, I did it for a reason.
Oh,
That's what he
I
wouldn't even
like
know
that
what the
though.
reason was. He wouldn't even know what the reason, but he would just say, I did it for a reason. And so we even repeat that. He said that when he was probably 4, but we have repeated that throughout the years because I'm like, that is so profound for a kid to be like, it's not that I just did it. I did it for a reason.
That's amazing. I love that whole, like, I did it for a reason though, because at least you know that he's thinking through the process of it and not just, I tell my kids all the time that what separates us from the animals is our impulse control because we get to choose how we respond to things. Animals are just driven by impulses and they see something, they take it. They're hungry, they eat, like that's what animals do. But we have a fully functioning prefrontal cortex that allows us to reason, which is amazing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the fact that he was using that reasoning at a young age is just so cool. And watching children grow up is fascinating. I just love it.
Yeah, it really is. It's really cool. And to see things like, I think it's neat to be able to notice the similarities that we may have within our children, but not like pushing our own insecurities or our own traumas or whatever onto our kids. And I often think about like, if these things didn't happen to Rebeka, who was the child, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what would my life have been like? And I look at my kids in a way of like, I want them to have that freedom where they're not chained by, certain things that have happened. Like those things don't get to happen because, like I said, Greg and I have done the work to like, nope, this stops here with me. So that way our kids get to walk in freedom and not be chained by those things. And it's interesting to me to see them flourish in that regard instead of being chained. And it's like, man, I wonder who Rebeka could have been, right? But also at the same time, it's like I'm okay with not going down that road because I'm super thankful for how I got here. And
Mm-hmm.
because I'm here, I get to make sure that those things don't cross this boundary line.
Right. Well, and I mean, again, just mindset and the way that you choose to look at things. But here you are in your 30s, about to have a high school senior, you know,
Yeah.
you're basically 4 years away from with your daughter, with Macy, you're about 4 years away from her being a high school senior. And so you'll be in your early 40s and an empty nester. I mean, you're not even halfway through life at
Yeah.
that point. There's so much you could do to move forward with whatever you want to. What does Rebeka 2.0 look like as she moves forward with the second section of her life? And I think that choosing to look at things the way that you have decided to at this point is just going to propel you into being ready for whatever that next thing is that's coming. And I don't think that this has held you back in any way. This is a prime example of one of those, did it happen to you or did it happen for you?
Mm,
And this is a prime example of this happened for you. And the
yeah.
growth that you've had over this time is going to make that second season for you just so powerful. I cannot wait to see what that looks like.
I know. I'm excited too, just thinking about it. Like, I just was thinking this morning about Levi because the topic of conversation is what's next, because you're a junior in high school and everybody thinks you have to have it together,
Right.
like you don't. It's fine. Nobody does. Okay.
Right. They're
But
all
it's
pretending
fun.
if they do.
Right. Yeah. They're faking it. But it's fun to think about the possibilities of how you want to move forward in your life. So we're talking with him about, well, what do you want to go to college? Do you want, and he's an incredible football player. So his goal is to play college football.
I
And
totally
so,
can.
yeah, yeah,
It's
that's the
happening.
goal. Yeah, it's happening. We're speaking that into life, right? And then I have Macy, who when he's gone, she'll be stepping into high school at the same time. So, and I was thinking this morning, Macy's going to be like an only child for like the last 4 years of her
For all of high
schooling.
school.
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting dynamic for sure. But I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to the future. I'm excited for what it, entails and just our marriage and like what that's going to look like in the next season
Mm-hmm.
too, because I'm excited to like get to hang out with him and
Yeah.
we'll kind of get to know each other again, I feel like, and I'm really excited for what's ahead and all the things. And I'm super thankful for what is behind us too, because like you said, that's what got us to today.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel super grateful because I feel like I have a really beautiful life. So
You do. You have a beautiful life. You have wonderful children. You have a fantastic husband. And
thank
none
you.
of that happened by chance. All of that
Right.
came from putting in the work and working on
Hmm.
yourself and working on your relationships and choosing to, in those hard times as a parent, work through those times, have the hard conversations with your children. All of everything that you have at this point in your existence didn't just drop in your lap. It's all things
Right.
that you prioritized. You decided they were important. You decided your relationships with your children and your husband and your friends were important. So you cultivated those. And I just think
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. I just love you so much. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story. I would love to have you back on to talk about, well, so many other things. I just have so many things that I feel like we can go from here with.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get to talk to you again. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And if any of our listeners would like to follow Miss Rebeka Beavers, then I will definitely make sure that we drop a link to her socials here in the description. So make sure that you follow her. You will love it. She's fantastic. And we will see you next time. Bye, friends.